Great, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I'm grateful that I'm joined by my associate, Kelly Schnur. We'll introduce ourselves in just a little bit more depth here, but we just want to kind of set the table for today's discussion. We're going to be talking about transformation journeys. Sometimes in today's agile world, we think, gee, we'd like to do things really, really fast. And that's absolutely an important consideration. But the other part of it is, can we actually get results? And so we're going to talk today about how we strike that balance between speed and agility and how we achieve lasting, sustainable change in an organization. And we'll talk more about why we choose that term journey, but that's for us sort of the language that really starts to signal for folks what it takes to pull off substantive change in an organization. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, AlignOrg Solutions is an organization of specialists that focus on helping organizations clarify their marketplace position and strategy, diagnosing an organization's capability of being able to deliver results and accomplish their strategy. We certainly do organization design and change, and then we work with leaders as they strive to gain the skill sets and competencies necessary to align their organizations for success and differentiation. And most of the time, we do work with our clients by conducting projects. We engage with them, we go in with our team of specialists, and we do work with them. But the other part of what we do is we build capability in practitioners and in executives so that they can be better equipped to lead organization transformations inside of their respective organizations. And today's webinar is really a small sliver of some of that work, where we try to help build the capability of others to do this type of change work in their organization. Now, a little bit about me, and then I'll let Kelly say a couple of things. I lead the AlignOrg Solutions practice, and I've been involved doing this work for the better part of, now about 20 years. It's something that I just absolutely love. I do it in lots of organizations, whether that be an industrial, a media company, retail, financial services, you name it. And what's so intriguing to me is that even though each of those industries have their distinctive components, what's fun for me is the things that are similar. And the ideas that work in one place can be used and adapted in other places to drive innovation. And so one of the things that I'm excited about right now is a project our team's working on, where they're working with an organization on the supply chain. And because of that work in the supply chain, it's going to transform a whole bunch of the work in their organization in terms of how they go to market with their customer. And that's the fun work that we're excited to be doing. So sorry to have gotten on a little bit of a tangent there, but just want to give you a flavor of who I am and what keeps me going each day. So Kelly, do you want to say a couple of things?
Sure. Thanks, Reed. Kelly Schnur. I'm one of the senior consultants at AlignOrg Solutions. I have about 30 years of experience working in operations and human resources, and I bring that experience to my consulting work here at AlignOrg Solutions. Like Reed, I enjoy working with companies in all different sectors so that we can help them improve their ability to achieve the strategy that they're looking to achieve. So I'm happy to be here with you today.
Great. Now, as we both tried to allude to, we do get the chance to move around to different organizations, and we also, all of us, hopefully are reading and are participating with organizations all the time. And so a few of the ones we've put here on this screen are just organizations that we've touched, not necessarily as clients, but sometimes just through, conferences, sometimes through the media. And what's great is all of these organizations and many others have stories to tell about how to successfully, and sometimes sadly unsuccessfully, manage organization transformation journeys. And Kelly and I find that the stories that we gain from other organizations become very important in terms of our learning journey, in terms of how we make sense of the frameworks and concepts that we're going to spend time on. So we want to start today by diving right in with a very important concept that probably all of us sort of know intuitively, but it's very important for us to wrap our heads around. And I'm just going to go ahead and state it the way it's here on the slide, which is our thinking drives our behaviors. And it's ultimately our behaviors that will drive the performance that we achieve, whether that be individually or as an organization. And so therefore the corollary is, if I want to change my performance, or if I want to change the performance of my organization, then I ultimately have to change the way people think. And that's the root of what this whole topic is about, is when we undertake a transformation in an organization, and the reason we refer to it as a journey is because the journey is not just the project management steps of marking things off the list of, we tested that, we communicated this, we have the training plan done, we have the communications list done. Those are all important. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, we're successful when performance changes. And that's ultimately what the journey is about, is changing an organization to the point where performance can evolve and change. Now, when we talk about this journey, the way that Kelly and I talk about this in the organizations that we work is we talk about it as a multi-step, multi-phase kind of thing. And each one of these phases can be approached in a very agile manner, where each, the diagnosis and assessment can be done in a series of sprints. And then we stop and we say, what did we learn from this? And how are we now going to use that to plan as we move into our next phase? And then we'll do another series of sprints to clarify the strategy of an organization and how it's set up at a macro level to be able to deliver differentiated results. And again, then we'll pause, we'll look at those minimal viable products, and we'll plan for what further enhancements and revisions do we need to make. And then we go into the micro design sprints. And that's really the journey as you go from assessing where you are to ultimately down the road, hopefully realizing and achieving sustainable results. Now, before we really get into our topic today, you'll notice that there's two orange sort of, I don't know what you call them, sandwich buns on the top and the bottom. The top one is really about the role that leadership has to play. Executives play an important role in making sure that the choices made throughout this entire journey are well aligned and are going to help drive results. And at the bottom, we have this notion of the journey. And that's where we want to focus our attention today, because when we start to talk about the journey, it is a journey. Now, the area we're going to zero in on is here toward the end of the entire journey, where we've now got our blueprint and our plans, and we know what it is that we think needs to change. We know how structures will change, systems will change, work needs to change, maybe incentives, culture even sometimes. And now we're at this point where we're saying, how do we take these ideas of change and begin to move them through the organization? And you might say, well, gee, that's typical change management. And we'd come back and say, you're right, but it's more. And so where we want to go is sort of drilling down in a little bit more depth as to what it takes to sort of take the journey from the drawing board to actual practice. And as you can see, when we get into this phase of planning for the deployment and the realization of change and the improvements that we're trying to drive, we start with an initiation period. And during this initiation period, we're chartering, obviously, the work and the teams that need to be involved. We're pulling the right people together. We're defining people's roles. We're setting up the change structure. Then we're moving into a phase of planning that's absolutely vital. And we're going to talk a lot more about this, but we're going to be doing things in this phase which certainly are going to resonate with many of you, which is we're going to start to plan for the change itself. We're also going to be thinking about how do we change the work that people do, the roles and seats that people sit in if that needs to change, and then the tools and technologies that people are using to get their work done. And you'll notice by driving into some of those very foundational things, we're now getting to a place where we can hopefully affect behavior. And as we affect behavior, we change the way people perform. And that ultimately, this phase of the work or this step in the work brings us what we call the journey management plan. Because once that plan starts to emerge, now we can start to go into the realization part of this, where we're building the tools and things that are needed to actually make this change occur, the job aids, the training, the communications, the coaching, all of those, the system changes, the security access, all the things that need to go with it so that we can ultimately sustain the momentum and achieve the kind of performance that we're looking for. Now, we're going to dive into this in a bit more depth, and when we really think about this whole implementation and realization journey, there are some work streams. We want to talk about these work streams. You'll notice across the top the same four chunks or steps that we just walked through. We have the initiation step, we've got the change implementation planning step, we've got the realization step, and then we have the sustain step. And first of all, we all know that those blend together, but we're trying to break them out so they can at least be talked about and organized together. Now, looking down the left side, you'll notice that there are sort of four rows. And the first row deals with how do we manage the journey overall. And so we do all this project setup that we're used to doing. But we're coupling change management with program management. And so we see ourselves doing some assessment of what is the journey going to demand of people, what is it going to demand of the organization. Coming out of that, we get some of our traditional change plans. But we don't stop there and say, hey, I've done my job, I'm moving on. We have to also orchestrate the next row, which is how do we get people moved into the configuration and into the places they need to be. And we ultimately want people to say things like, I'm in my new role. I'm there. I get it. I know what I'm supposed to do. And so to do that and to orchestrate that, we begin to assess what are those movements. And can we build a plan to help move people into those configurations that will help them ultimately say, I know where I'm at now. I know where I sit. I know what I'm supposed to do. The next row, again, we can't stop there. We got to keep rolling, deals with the work. Am I doing my new role? So what is it about the work that needs to change? This is where we get into the rationale, we get into procedures, we get into the workflows, we get into the things that are going to help the work change. And so we build as well a work launch plan. And then finally, we ask ourselves, are there impacts to the technology and tools and equipment and facilities that we're working in that is going to enable or aid the work to be different and for people to behave differently? And so these four components, the change piece, the people movement, the work launch, and then the technology and tools piece, all come together to form what we refer to as the journey management plan. And hopefully you see this is more than a project plan. This is a lot of moving pieces that are coming together to bring together the things that are needed to affect real change. And then we go into realization where we start to execute this. We execute our change plans. We begin to move people. We coach them. We monitor their progress in their new roles. We make sure that work is transitioning properly. And then we move the work and we start to say, all right, do you have the job aids you need? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Who do you hand that off to? And then we obviously feather in the technology pieces and make sure that those are going to go live, that people have the access when they sit in their new chair being expected to do their new work and role. And then obviously the sustain piece is we keep our eye on this for a period of time to make sure that people are not reverting back, creating workarounds, or not ultimately making the changes that are desired. Now I'm going to kind of pause here because I've tried to overview when we talk about journey management what we're really talking about and what we're trying to get into today. Before we go forward, I want to extend an invitation to anyone on today's webinar, which is please feel free to interrupt at any point with questions. Now, I know that the audio is not such that you can ask them live, but if you chime in with questions, Kelly and I will make our best attempt to answer those questions. And we'll even, deviate or change some things today based on the kinds of questions that come in. So now, having given sort of this foundation, what we'd like to do now is talk about sort of three things that we find are absolutely essential for a successful transformation journey. Now, when you read these, you're going to think, well, yeah, those are obvious. First one, proper resourcing and governance. 2, get the right tools. 3, make sure you've got leaders behaving in a productive and an effective way. Yeah, those are all key things. So we want to just take a minute and kind of get a little bit deeper into some of the things that we've seen that make all the difference in whether or not your transformation journey is right.